Welcome to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. I'm your host for this session. I'm Sean.
And I'm Kevin.
And together we're going to talk about a unique problem that you might be having in your sales process and your sales world. This 15 minutes is designed for salespeople, sales managers, and CEOs of the company that are trying to increase their revenue and trying to be more productive in your sales processes. So let's get started.
Kevin, a lot of times my clients, when I talk to them for the first couple of meetings or when I'm just getting to know them, I find this situation. I'd be interested in hearing your comments and thoughts on this. But a lot of times the owner of the company, the CEO of the company is leading sales. And I primarily see it when the owner thinks that nobody else can sell better than him. And I keep going back to a conversation we had on this podcast several months ago where we had Tim Warren, who's the CEO of Helium SEO, and he talked about the fact that he could probably outsell a couple salespeople, but he couldn't outsell enough salespeople to get the company to where it wants to be. And in case people don't know, Helium SEO is a fantastic company that's growing pretty tremendously right now. There's no way one person could ever do it, but he had to get past that first couple salespeople. They probably weren't as good as he was because he could do everything. And every time he talked to a prospect, he was able to impart the trust of the company to that prospect. He could say, I promise you, we will make you work. We will make you successful, blah, blah, blah. His salespeople, that first couple salespeople, they couldn't necessarily do that. He didn't know how to get them there, but he had to get them there. He had to get through that process. And so many of the people I talk to where the owner is leading sales, it's because they just don't trust that they can get somebody else to get them through that process and get them going and get that prospect to be a customer. You are having the same feeling, that same experience when you talk to your potential clients as well?
I have that conversation almost every prospect meeting I have. And what it comes back to, and this is probably something of interest for our listening audience here, is that the way we break that conversation down or move the needle on that conversation is we talk about risk. What is the risk of the owner operator being the only salesperson or the sales leader? When the person is leading the company and leading sales, what you end up with is a business that is constrained by the amount of time that leader has. Some symptoms might be, if you're thinking about your own business, it might be, are my salespeople or are my delivery people asking me questions? Am I getting back to them in a timely fashion? Are they saying, hey, you're hard to get a hold of? Or, hey, the customer still, client still, prospect is still waiting on this piece of information. If you're hearing mumblings or rufflings like that in your organization, you might be facing a growth opportunity and a growth challenge all at the same time. What it boils down to is, how do you de-risk your organizational's growth potential by getting a sales leader in the sales leadership seat separate from you?
Great example. Thank you for that. There's a really good book that didn't get a lot of press. It's called The Goal, and it's about the theory of constraints within a manufacturing environment. It's a story where they go through this process of solving for how do we save the plant? How do we make our product more reliably? How do we make our product more effectively? How do we get enough product out the door? How do we have it so it's not always a rush? If you're a manufacturing company out there, then you've probably read The Goal because it's such an important book in that space. Because the theory of constraints is a big deal in manufacturing, but it's also a big deal in sales. What are the things that are limiting your success at being successful? What are the things that are getting in the way of you actually growing your company? Most companies that are listening to this podcast probably have a 1% or a 0.1% or a 0.01% market share. The reason that you aren't growing, the reason that you aren't getting ahead is probably not because there are not enough companies out there to buy your product. It's probably because you can't get your product out there in front of them for them to buy. And the key thing here is to make sure that you do have a sales manager, you do have professional salespeople in place so that the CEO can be the backup to that person, help them bring in the big deal, but not necessarily be the key person, because we really want to have a situation where we have multiple people talking about our product. The CEO is talking about the product. He's talking to the big customers. He's talking about the repeat customers. He's fixing bad problems that might have occurred because of slow delivery or lack of delivery. Those are things that the CEO can do effectively. But a salesperson, a sales manager is needed in order to bring in new revenue, and the owner of the company needs to have the confidence that they can create that environment and make that happen. So I want to just talk a little bit about there are operating systems for companies out there. And one of the most popular operating system out there is called EOS. You may have heard of the book. It's Traction. It's a great book. Everybody should read Traction, no matter how big your company is. But in EOS, we talk about the right person in the right seat. And sure, when it's a 3-person startup, the CEO is doing all the sales. But once we get to a certain size, once we have lots of employees, once we have lots of product that we can ship, then we need to have the professional salespeople take over. And that CEO needs to be able to step up and say, I need to build a sales organization, just like I had to build a manufacturing, just like I had to build a services organization, all those other departments that he had to build.
I like that you're narrowing and really honing in on the manufacturing piece because it's very linear. You can imagine raw materials coming in, getting processed, streamlined, same with sales, going out the door, servicing the customer. It really transcends all industries, though. That right person, right seat, having the one person accountable. For anyone listening out there who hasn't read Traction, please go read it. Rocket Fuel, US Life, all great books. If you don't have that kind of bandwidth, you may have already read The E-Myth. The boilerplate version of all of these things starts with, it's not the entire boilerplate of the book, but it all starts with mapping your organization, identifying everything you need from a infrastructure standpoint, internal infrastructure, to be successful. When Sean and I come to work with businesses like yours, we talk about infrastructure for sales. We take a sliver of that organizational structure and we focus very specifically and heavily on how to build out a healthy, productive, high-performance sales culture. Internally, we call it building paths to revenue fast. That's all fun to think about revenue, but the person who leads that needs to be accountable to that. That right person, right seat. They need skills, they need tactics, they need strategy, they need accountability, and they need to be able to give accountability. That kind of unvarnished review of your organization may shine a pretty bright light on some areas that you could improve. One of my favorite analogies is a football analogy. I was never a football player of any accord. When you think about a football dynasty, there's some teams that come to mind. You pick your favorite team, but just imagine a football dynasty, not someone who won a Super Bowl in a decade. It's the ones who are every year, every other year in the Super Bowl, highly competitive, winning or coming in as runner-up. With those teams, they are a dynasty. Why are they a dynasty? Because they didn't come in and say, "Ooh, we've got 3 marquee players. Whoop-de-doo, we're going to win some ball games." They started in the back office. They went to the strength and conditioning coaches. They went to facilities. They went to recruitment. They went to coaching. They went to data analytics. They went up and down from contracts to candy through their organization and said, we're going to build an organization that is systematic and repeatable. Because when somebody leaves, and people will, when you've got that right person accountable and the right people in the right seat, you've got nothing but a high performance culture. Some would say it's frictionless. Whatever analogy you want to come up with and apply, and not think about my New York Giants. If you can think of your team and think about how they built a dynasty, you can imagine that for your business. Your strength and conditioning coach may look like a HR manager. Your front office may be your customer service. Your data analytics may be your procurement team. Whatever you're working on, be intentional about it. Whether you're reading the E-Myth or you're mapping your EOS, hierarchy of people, do the work. It'll pay dividends for you long term, because when there's a problem, you'll be faster to solution the problem because you know where the problem originated and you've got people dedicated to jobs. Even if the same person's name shows up in a lot of different seats, you know how to solve the problem.
I'm going to give a different analogy just because not everybody's going to be a football fan like you and I are. But think about the last time you took a flight, because just about everybody that's listening to this podcast has been on a flight. You didn't have the CEO of Delta Airlines flying the plane. You didn't have the flight attendant flying the plane. You didn't have the baggage carrier flying the plane. All of that created an experience of getting you to where you had to be and giving you a successful flight so that you could get from point A to point B safely and on time. But it was all driven from the fact that you had a captain in the pilot seat flying the plane.
Let's bounce that around a little bit more. For the owner operator that's sitting in the seat, the leadership seat for sales now, they may not be ready to give up control. They may not be ready to cede control of that seat. My advice to them is, okay, I understand that. Let's talk about what that looks like. How are you holding yourself accountable? Because if you're not holding yourself accountable to a sales leadership standard, when you're ready to add that fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth salesperson, you're going to have to give up control, because you can't do that plus run the business, plus do all the other things inside the business and negotiate and cultivate banking relationships and talent pipelines and vendor relationships. You can't do everything. There's just simply not enough hours in the day to do them all effectively, well, and on quality as someone else who's dedicated to that role could. That's why when we see it, back to our sports analogies, whether you're football, basketball, baseball, the head coach is different from the GM, is different from the president of the organization, is different from the strength and conditioning or batting coaches. There's purpose-built roles for organizations as they scale up. If you want to know how we know this, is because we've done this a few times. We've worked with a number of businesses, and this is how we help people grow. And notice that we are staying home and talking about sales, but there's a lot of other disciplines that can help businesses grow. And if your business needs one of those other resources, lean on Sean and I. Part of this podcast and our CEO workshop series, however you're experiencing us, our give is to help the small business community. If there's a resource you're looking for, we probably know somebody. We invite those conversations as well.
Thank you for that. I think that's great advice. My goal is to make my clients better. And sometimes that's me spending a lot of time with them and helping them in the area of sales. But sometimes it is my 38 years of advice, all the gray hair that I've earned through the School of Hard Knocks, skin knees, that I am able to advise them on things that are outside of sales. And I don't say that I'm an expert outside of sales, because I'm not. But I know friends, I know people that are experts outside of sales, and I'll be happy to bring them into those organizations that need that help, whether it be marketing or supply chain or logistics or one of a variety of legal matters they have. And with marketing, unfortunately, you have to have lots of different marketing, part-time people in the process, just because marketing is so wide and nobody's an expert at all the aspects of marketing. It's okay to ask for help, but it's also very important that you have experts doing the job as much as possible so that you can be very, very effective at driving performance and driving your company forward. I'm going to go back to that earlier podcast that we had with Tim Warren, CEO of Helium, SEO, who has decided that even though he was a great salesperson, in order for him to achieve the goals that he wanted to achieve for that company, he had to relinquish all of those capabilities and only be the CEO. And he had to hire salespeople to go out and sell. He had to hire smart people to write the code to make it work for him. He had to hire implementation people to implement it for his clients. He had to hire supply chain people to get the right product in front of them. And he had to hire the ability to actually support those customers after they were customers. And all of that became the entire ecosystem. If you haven't listened to those two podcasts that we did, it is definitely worth your effort to go back and grab those two episodes. They're fantastic episodes. Tim did a fantastic job of explaining why Helium SEO is so good. And part of it was having standard operating procedures for every single job. That's in the second episode that he recorded with us. Having every job knows exactly what to do and how to do their job and what is expected of them. And what is expecting of us is that we get done on time. And we are now running out of time. I do appreciate everybody being on. I hope that this was a little bit valuable for you. And please come back and join us for Two Tall Guys Talking Sales.
And that's a wrap. Thanks again for joining Kevin and Sean on Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. Tune in every Tuesday, or when our podcast drops every Tuesday at 4:30, wherever you consume your podcast. And don't miss our monthly CEO workshop, where we unpack some of the big CEO questions facing your business. Until next time, we're looking forward to seeing you. Happy selling.